The relationship between Kurds and Assyrians are quite complicated and one of the most complex one in the Middle East. The Kurdistan regional government have portrayed their region as one which protects and respects all religious and ethnic minorities, and comparing it to the rest of the Middle East, there is for sure no better place for minorities to live. However, despite this, minor voices from Assyrians have been calling out that the Kurds are driving Assyrians out of their homes in Kurdish-controlled areas. But let's go back to the origin of the two peoples. The Assyrian people are an ethnic group indigenous to the Middle East. A vast majority of them belongs to Christianity and had their peak during the reign of the Assyrian Empire. The empire itself stretched from Egypt in the west to the Persian Gulf in the east, making it one of the first multi-ethnical empires in the world. In the book The Kurdish National Movement, Its Origin and Development by Wadi Juaidem, an Arab-American professor of history, we can read at page 13 about one of the ethnic peoples that lived in ancient Assyria. They were called the Medes and would in time, together with other local people, shape the modern Kurds. The empire of the Assyrians were mighty and strong, but was shaken as Medes were revolting, and eventually, through alliances, managed to attack the empire, causing its downfall. The fall of the Assyrians eventually caused a vacuum which was filled by Medes and Iranian groups. Eventually, the Median Empire rose to power, another multi-ethnical empire with Assyrians living there as well. For the upcoming generations, following the fall of the Median Empire, and in times of other kingdoms and empires as well, Kurds and Assyrian lived together in coexistence, peace but also conflict. During the Ottoman Empire, the relationship between Kurds and Christian groups, Assyrians included, were once more focused on. Initially, the Kurds were treated better than most Christian groups in the Ottoman Empire. The reason was religion. Since most Kurds were Muslims and the ruling Ottoman Empire was Islamic, the Kurds benefited among their many neighbors by being able to not pay the obligated taxes for non-Muslims. Some Kurds even earned high-ranking positions within the Ottoman Empire's military rank and government. This definitely sparked tension between the groups. Beside that, the Ottomans often used Kurds in the area to maintain control among the Christians, who were a very large minority group in the Ottoman Empire. The Kurds, however, were very split among different clans and families, hundreds of them actually. Some were loyal to the Ottoman Empire, others were not, and some remained very neutral. But to understand why the relationship between Kurds and Assyrians really took a bad turn, one must look at the basics of the World War I, which started in 1914. The war had two sides, divided between the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. These two sides both had major powerful countries and empires behind them, and the Ottoman Empire took the side of the Central Powers. The Ottoman Empire used its central military force to fight, but also used Kurdish irregular forces during the war. The Kurdish irregular forces was basically Kurdish clans loyal to the Ottoman Empire, often connected by either religion or social benefits, that didn't represent any Kurdish cause officially, but rather worked for their clan or at a very extent the Ottoman Empire, which they saw as the justified caliphate that should rule the area. Nationalism was non-existing, or at least very new in the area, and few Kurds had the national thoughts of Kurdistan on their minds at this time. Even those Kurds that opposed the Ottoman Empire more thought of their own clans best rather than a united Kurdistan at this point. In time, the Ottomans created a special cavalry called the Hamidi Cavalry, which was officially tasked to patrol the Russo-Ottoman front lines, but in practice got the mission to harass and kill Christian minorities in the area. The cavalry was mainly of members from Kurdish clans, but had Turks, Arabs, and Turkmens within them. Another point to keep in mind is the fact that under the Ottoman Empire, following the Young Turks Revolution of 1909, conscription was introduced. This meant that citizens of the empire, regardless of their religious or ethnic background, were obliged to join the Ottoman army. The Ottoman forces included Kurds, but also Greeks, Assyrians, and Armenians, who were compelled to serve against their will. Many who, despite the coercion, refused to serve either hid or fled to avoid reprisals. To summarize, the Kurds and Assyrians have lived in mostly the same geographical area for years, while still having villages and cities that's only been either Assyrian or Kurdish. The village next to it have been mixed, with the two living in coexistence. As the tensions between Muslim and Christian groups escalated, the different groups started to choose a side depending on what they thought would benefit their end the best. The British Empire, which opposed the Ottomans during and after the First World War, used the Assyrians as more or less proxy forces against the Ottomans, with the promise that they would earn political rewards after the war, and the Ottomans did the same with the Kurds. Many Christians were killed, not only Assyrians, but also Greeks and Armenians. Beginning in 1915 and going on with its most intense years, during 1916, 17 and 18, both the Armenian Genocide and the Seyfo Genocide took place. The first part of the genocide were located in Ahmed or Diyarbakir under the leadership of Turkish Mehmed Reşid, but Reşid also ordered the killings of Assyrians in and around Mardin. Both Kurds and Turks participated in these genocides. However, some Kurdish clans disloyal to the Ottoman Empire helped Armenians and Assyrians to hide from the genocide. By hiding them in Kurdish homes, where Turks and other Kurds rarely looked, the Christians could be safe for a while until a safe pass out of the country could be arranged. Many Kurdish families who had lived side by side with both Armenians and Assyrians also adopted children from the two peoples in order to keep the children safe from guaranteed death. Reports claims that in some cases all men were executed in the cities, while the women fled south, many to the area around Mosul. Many of the fleeing widows died on the way due to starvation and harsh condition. For example, in Van, late 1915, 8,000 Turkish soldiers ordered and executed the killing of 20,000 Assyrian civilians. In Tur Abdin, the Assyrian people heard about the massacres that were happening in the other cities. A resistance were prepared, and the newly formed militia was led by Masud Mirza. The Ottomans ordered the Hamadiye forces to attack the city, and hours of gun battles took place, ending in many casualties on both sides, with an Assyrian victory in the end. The city of Tur Abdin became one of the few areas where the Assyrians were successfully in the defense, as they managed to defend their city from another 3 separate attacks from the irregulars until they retreated for good. A total of 1,000 people were killed on both sides during the 4 attempted sieges. On 3rd of March 1918, the Kurdish clan leader Simko Shikak led his army, including Turks and Arabs, against the Assyrians, killing the Assyrian leader Shebrun Benjamin in the process. This led to a revenge action years later, where Assyrian forces attacked the Kurdish fortress of Simko, coming out victorious and with Simko escaping and fleeing. An estimated 250,000 Assyrians died during Seyfo, with some numbers claiming 300,000. This time in history is by many Kurds remembered as dark days in Kurdish history. Although some Kurds proudly saved thousands of Armenians and Assyrians, other Kurds participated in shameful actions that killed another thousands of innocents. Years later, during the Barzani rebellion in Iraqi-occupied Kurdistan between 1931 to 1932, the Assyrians had a minority role in Iraq, where many Arabs were looking at them with suspicion due to them being a non-Muslim minority in Iraq. For this reason, many Assyrians joined the Barzani movement and rebellion, and according to the book Kurdish National Movement, page 219 to 220, the Assyrians made up an important smaller part of Barzani's army. On August 1943, a band of Kurdish nationalists founded the Komala in Mahabad. The Komala's intense nationalism was indicated by the fact that only persons born a Kurdish mother and father were eligible for membership in the organization. The only exception, and this one is rather interesting to understand the relationship between Kurds and Assyrians, were if a person was born of a Kurdish father and Assyrian mother. For many, this seems somewhat strange considering the vexed relations between the two peoples during World War I, but in reality, this might have been an indication of the, at the time, close relations that existed between Assyrians and Kurds. When the Baath party took power in 1963, Iraq's political situation changed drastically, especially towards Kurds and Christians. Under the new regime, the policy towards Kurds escalated, and during this period, Assyrian villages were also destroyed and thousands displaced. The Kurds and Assyrians who still shared many places in coexistence would in many cases end up fighting together against the central Baghdad regime. 1 year before, in 1962, the Assyrian woman Margaret George Shello joined the Kurdish Peshmerga forces in their fight against the Iraqi government. She was at that point only 20 years old. Margaret would soon become an important face outwards in the Kurdish resistance, and among Kurds she became known as the Joan of Arc of Kurdistan. During her time, she led mixed Kurdish-Assyrian units and died 1969, becoming one of head legends of the Peshmerga. She certainly placed one of the first seeds for today's women revolution within Kurdish forces in both Bashur and Rojava. The situation in Iraq changed dramatically with the decline and fall of Saddam Hussein. The Kurds were able to establish the other Iraq, a generally secure area marked by toleration of ethnic and religious differences. The Assyrian people is by KRG also officially recognized as an ethnic and religious minority in the KRG with cultural and linguistic rights protected by law. In March 2010, the elected head of the Nineveh government in Iraqi-occupied Kurdistan accused the Kurdish militias of forcing non-Muslim out of the Nineveh area. According to the accusation, this was made in order to make the area part of the Kurdistan regional government. The accusation itself was sent to the UN, but it was later revealed that those behind the accusation were not of Assyrian or Christian origin, but frankly Sunni Arabs loyal to Iraq, trying to create a split between the two groups in the everyday more and more independent northern part of Iraq. Kurdish leaders denied the accusations and claimed that Al-Qaeda-aligned militias are to blame. The leader behind the accusation, Athil al-Nujafi, had even, according to US authorities, a predetermined hostility towards Kurdish interests, Not to mention that neither he or his closest were Assyrians, they were all Sunni Arabs. Of course, the Kurdistan regional government have its various problems, but comparing it to the rest of Iraq, both now and throughout its 100 years history, the Kurdistan regional government have treated and made the circumstances for Christian minorities many times better. In the refugee crisis following the war against ISIS, over 1 million people sought refuge in the KRG, with at least 100,000 of them being Christian Assyrians. Despite these issues, there have been many examples of collaboration. Assyrian and Kurdish politicians have often worked together in the Iraqi parliament and within the KRG. Kurdish parties such as HDP and DTP have taken strong action to support the rights of Assyrians and other Christian minorities in Turkey. For example, they have elected Assyrian figures to senior positions, both within their parties and in Turkish institutions. In May 2010, the Kurdish man Berzan Boti chose to donate all the land he owned to the Assyrian organization Seyfo Center. His motivation was that this land didn't belong to him but to Assyrians who had been murdered in the area, and by returning it to its rightful owners, the Assyrians, he sought to apologize for the actions of his ancestors against them. The link to the full article is in the text box below if you'd like to read more. Today, within the 250,000 sized Peshmerga, there are several Assyrian groups fighting under Kurdish and Assyrian flags. The same thing goes for the YPG forces in Rojava, who have several wings of Assyrian troops within their army. One of them is called Western Kurdistan's Assyrian Militia. To summarize, the relationship between Kurds and Assyrians have throughout time been up and down. Although the relations have been increasingly better and better since the 1930s, some Assyrians refuse to forget the Kurdish involvement in the Seyfo genocide.